told that the PM will relax COVID rules this week. What's the science behind that decision?
So the Prime Minister is meeting the Cabinet this morning to look through and get that balance right. So we can see that infections are coming down quite rapidly, that the hospitalisations and deaths are following as well. They tend to lag behind, obviously, the case numbers, but nonetheless you can see the trend within that. He'll be looking at the best advice possible, but getting the balance right, because it's important that we don't work and live under government diktat for a moment longer than is necessary, to allow the economy to recover, to allow people to get back to a sense of normality, whilst keeping people safe, clearly.
Will the changes come into effect this week? It's Thursday, Friday, isn't it?
Well, that's for the Prime Minister to announce later on. I mean, the regulations fall away in about 3 weeks' time anyway. 22nd of March.
We brought it forward a month.
But the Prime Minister will make his announcement later on. Now, that final decision hasn't been taken.
OK. As of then, it looks as though even if you test positive for COVID, you don't have to self-isolate legally.
So that will be, well, again, that decision will be taken later on, so we'll see the guidance around that. But there will be a point when all of this is falling away, and so it will come back to employers and employees to make those decisions for themselves, but we'll see the guidance that comes out later.
If a member of your team, next week, say, if this comes into effect Thursday, Friday, next week, if a member of your team tests positive for COVID, would you tell them to stay at home or come to work? I
mean, I would say that, like any illness, frankly, any transmissible illness, you would say stay at home. I mean, that you know, if you had a flu or something like that, you'd normally expect people to take the view, but it would be down to themselves or down to their employer.
Yeah, that's the problem, though, isn't it? Because you're a responsible employer and you would say to your staff, stay at home and get well. But if somebody's working on a construction site or, an industry that is sensitive to the number of staff that is there, they're going to feel under pressure to go to work, aren't they?
There is this, and this is why we need to make sure that we've got really good guidance for employers. But as I say, there comes a time when the pandemic moves to more of an endemic approach to COVID, in the same way flu and other viruses are treated, and that's what we've got to get back to. But it's a fine balance, clearly, and that's why Cabinet's meeting this morning, to go through the science, to go through that balance and debate it, and then obviously the Prime Minister will come before Parliament to make his announcement.
I understand, but as a government minister, as a responsible employer, as of today, you would say to somebody, if they test positive for COVID, probably they should stay at home so that they don't spread it, no matter what the rules are.
I mean, as of today, that is the rules. So we'll see
next week.
But we'll see what happens, because I don't even know when the date is that the Prime Minister's going to announce.
Whenever he
because the decision hasn't been. Well, then we'll see what the guidance is, because, as I say, you can't just preempt what he's going to say.
Because get rid of all the rules.
But it depends on the date, because you can see that the case numbers are coming down quite significantly, and if they carry on that same trajectory, by the time you get to the 22nd of March, anyway, there will be at a comparatively low rate. We're also dealing with predominantly a variant that's a lot milder than previous variants. That doesn't mean we can be complacent, because what we are saying is that COVID hasn't gone away. We're talking about balance because we're still living with COVID.
Yeah, but what about those that are most vulnerable in our society? I mean, we know of a 95-year-old lady who lives in a castle, and every COVID restriction is taken to keep her safe, and she still contracted it.
She will, and this will happen, and she's still working, but she's working from home, she's working in isolation, and that's exactly what we're talking about, learning to live with COVID. There comes a point at some time when we're able to do that. We're able to give as many people back their freedoms as possible. We're as many people to go about their business, and including allowing the economy to recover. But that can't be at the expense of human life and human well-being. But we've got to get that balance absolutely right.
But if you're pressured by your employer to go to work and you feel that you shouldn't, do you think that, as an employee, you have a right to say, no, I don't want to spread this virus any more than it is, so I'm going to stay at home?
Yeah, I mean, look, every employer has a statutory duty to their employees. That is the case whether it's COVID, whether it's any other disease or any other ailment. I would encourage any employee that is in that situation to approach ACAS, to go on the ACAS website, and to follow through complaints through that way, because employers, no matter what it is, have a statutory duty.
Interestingly, the unions, a lot of the big three unions, frontline doctors, all saying it's reckless, utter lunacy and a super spreader free-for-all. Why are they all wrong, do you think?
I just think it's a balance that I was talking about. And clearly the unions and the other people that you describe sit in it, they have their balance in a different place. What we've always said is that we don't want to have a moment longer than we need to have government dictating how people run their lives.
And what's the rationale about getting rid of free tests? Because if we don't have free tests, people won't spend 35 quid on a box of tests, so we won't know if there are any variants or whatever.
So what we're going to do is, either way, we'll have a level of surveillance so we can check for variants, we can check to see what's going on. But nonetheless, you saw the Prime Minister yesterday talking about the fact that we can't continue forevermore spending £2 billion a month on tests. And if you think what that £2 billion might go towards, there's a lot of other backlogs in the NHS, other illnesses in the NHS that money could otherwise go for. So for every person that's worried about a test, there may be another person that's worried about a cancer diagnosis, for example.
Do we know when the free tests are going?
Again, no, the Prime Minister will make his statement later on.
Talk to me about what's happening with Ukraine. Are we closer or further away from the invasion this morning than we were yesterday?
Well, I'm not sure about yesterday, but there is the clear signs that that there are still troop movements on the border. There's 7,000 more troops than there were just a few days ago, despite the Russians trying to signal the fact that they were pulling away from the border. So there is a very, very credible threat, and that's why we've got to continue to be vigilant. We've got to continue to work with Ukraine and Poland, as Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, was doing just this week. And it's important that Vladimir Putin comes to we engage in diplomatic approach to this, because otherwise the loss of life will be horrendous.
OK. I've seen some of these tanks with Z written on the side. Do we know what that is?
I don't know.
No, I don't know either. Lots of papers are reflecting on that today. I'm sure it'll become apparent in the fullness of time. How much do we have to take our hat off to the soft diplomacy from President Macron, who again was on the phone yesterday to President Putin for almost 2 hours? And it does look as though we might potentially be heading towards some sort of summit between the Americans and the Russians as a direct result of President Macron getting involved.
I think what's really good is that all of the NATO countries are working closely together on this. So they're all playing leading roles in making sure that we can diffuse the situation. And hopefully, therefore, Vladimir Putin will step back from that situation, which, as I say, will be pretty horrendous.
But he does seem to be doing, Macron seems to be far more effective than we are. I just wondered why that was.
No, I'm not sure that's right. I think
our Foreign Secretary was, she was snubbed when she went to Moscow.
That's because she's saying things that aren't really palatable to the Russian Foreign Minister. Things that he doesn't want to hear. So Foreign Secretary.
That's diplomacy, though. I think the French are doing it in a different way and getting much further than we do.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I think you have to say the good with the bad. You have to say the things that they don't want to hear. But then you have to give people a way out. That's diplomacy. That you never cut their retreat. And I hope, therefore, both of those approaches that come together alongside the Foreign Secretary's work with Poland and Ukraine and the Prime Minister being in the Security Conference in Munich will actually bear fruit, and Vladimir Putin will come to see that it's right to step back.
We know that we've moved Brits out of the embassy for now in Kiev, moved them away to a different part of the country. We also know that the Americans have moved their embassy staff from Moscow for now. What are we going to do?
I'm not privy to those conversations. I'm a business minister, not a Foreign Office minister, so I know.
But you know quite a lot about cyber attacks, though, don't you? How worried are we about cyber attacks?
Well, yes. I mean, that's a real threat. That's a real threat. I mean, we've already seen a lot of work that's, they're worried about cyber attacks, particularly in Ukraine, but that could easily be spread further around Europe. And so these are. How
worried are we about them in the UK?
Well, we will be dealing with those, with the National Cybersecurity Centre, and I'd push out messages to any business to make sure that they've got adequate protection, whether software and hardware.
OK, so we haven't had any that we need to worry about as of the last couple of weeks when the tensions have been heightened.
Well, there's nothing I can report on
that you've been aware of. OK. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you a couple of things. Firstly, about Her Majesty and how do we know how she is? And...
I don't know, but I wish her all the best. I do understand that she's still working at home, and as we were talking earlier on about COVID and what would happen if you get it. It seems from the reports that I'm hearing that they're relatively mild symptoms, and I hope that is exactly how it stays until she's better.
Yeah, as do we all. 95 years young. She looks amazing still, doesn't she? Tiny, tiny, tiny. You can put her in your pocket. She's amazing. Just before we let you go, obviously the Downing Street party question. If the Prime gets a fixed penalty notice, should he stay on?
I think there's not much moved on, to be fair, since last time I spoke to you. I think what we want to do is see what happens with the police action and the police report, see what happens with the Sue Gray report, and then look at it in the round. What we've got to be... I've always said I'd treat it a real high bar to get rid of any Prime Minister.
What about if they break the law?
Because I think we just need to see it in the round. That's why I want to see it.
Yeah, but if a PM breaks the law or misguides Parliament, misleads Parliament... how can he stay?
Well, I think it needs. I need to see context. I absolutely need to see context before I make any decision, and I think that's right because. But I understand this is. I understand this is one that's not actually being investigated.
Not by the police.
The pictures that we're looking at.
Not by the police.
So in terms of law breaking, that's not going to be. That's not going to reach the threshold of evidence. But nonetheless, that's what I mean about context. That's why I want to see the Sue Gray report, see what the police find, and then we can work through have that conversation at that point.
Yeah, but people singing "Happy Birthday" in the cabinet room with your interior designer there,
But that's why I want to see. I'm not going to. There's not a lot I can add until from.
But my question to start with was very straightforward. It wasn't about any of the pictures that we're showing. It was about if the police have decided that he's broken the law and he gets a fixed penalty notice. Do we have a Prime Minister in place who has broken the law?
Well, I'm gonna wait until I see context before I really make any more judgment on it.